thank you all for joining us today. We are going to be talking today about correcting those year-end forms. And my name is Hannah Walk. I am the product manager for our tax and compliance solutions. I've been working in compliance for almost 9 years now, with products spanning property tax, affordable housing, data privacy, corporate ethics, and payroll tax. I've been a Greenie since June of 2023, and I'm really excited today to be presenting with Alicia.
Hi, I'm Alicia Rocks, and I've been with Greenshades for just over 11 years now. I've kind of been all over the company in different positions. I started out here in support, moved up to quality assurance, was a product manager at one time, and now I'm helping keep all the gears running smoothly here as a strategic initiatives manager.
All right, so today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about when you need to do adjustments, the process, and kind of principles of correction, adjustment, and revision, what those three things are, what the differences are. And then we'll get into the technicals of how to do corrections for 941, how to do corrections for W-2, and how to do corrections for 1099. I know it looks like a big agenda, but I promise we will get through this pretty quick. And then we will wrap it up and answer some questions. Just before we get too far into it, we do want to add this legal disclaimer that the content we're going to talk about today is not formal legal advice. Neither Alicia nor I are lawyers. And so you should always consult with your local counsel as well as your organization's legal and accounting teams before making any large decisions, including submitting corrections. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide a high-level overview of the corrections process and talk about how Greenshades can help. And if you don't have counsel already identified for your organization, Greenshades does partner with My HR Counsel to provide our customers with affordable, online, on-demand legal advice. And I'm going to turn it over to Alicia to talk about when we need to do adjustments.
All right. Well, let's talk about some adjustments. One of the most common things that we find here at Greenshades as a reason for needing to do any type of correction, even if it's not a full correction, an adjustment, or revision, is human error. And so for a lot of those reasons, people come to Greenshades to help combat that. So things like missing information. Maybe in your accounting package you forgot to assign a state withholding to someone, and you find out at the end of the year, and now you're backtracking. Those are things that you could catch in your software a little bit earlier than year end. Bad social security numbers, we do offer a service here that can run those through the SSA verification and make sure that all of your EINs for your 1099 types and the social security numbers for your employees match up before you submit your returns. There's also the case where you might have filed your 4 941s throughout the year, and then you get to the end of the year and the numbers you filed on those 941s don't happen to match the same totals that your W-2s contain. That can also be a cause for a correction on either a 941, or perhaps you made a mistake on the W-2 when you were totaling things out. So both things to double check. There's also the opportunity to find an over or under withholding when you get ready to do your reconciliations at the end of the year. Double check your wage bases. Now that the new year has started, that is something that a lot of people try to get ahead of and don't realize the reports they ran have the new wage base from the current year and not the wage base from the previous year. I've seen that happen as well. And then just plain bad data. Sometimes there is something that happens in the lines of getting information from where you are taking that data and getting it into Greenshades, and we just want to always suggest that people verify their totals and make sure that everything they expect to be there is in fact there.
All right, and now we'll talk a little bit about the difference between corrections, adjustments, and revisions. So depending on where you are in your process for your tax return, you might need to do a revision, amendment, or a correction. These are kind of three different things, and you do them in different ways. If you are going to, if you have distributed your forms to recipients, but you haven't submitted yet to the IRS or the Social Security Administration, you can revise the information on the form. That means that you haven't made your official filing yet, but you have started distributing your forms. So you can just revise the information and distribute new forms without any kind of issue. You don't need to tell the government that you are wrong. You just need to update the forms that you've already distributed. Sometimes you can do what's called an amendment, which means you have additional information to add. The information that you submitted was valid but not complete. And so you can do an amendment to add that additional information to the data that was already submitted. But you might also be needing to file a correction. A correction is when you need to replace the information that was already filed with new information. This is kind of a fine line between when you can file an amendment and when you can file a correction. And so you should always work with your company counsel to determine which path you should take in that instance. So let's talk about correcting those 941s. This is a pretty in-depth process. Just a fair warning to all of you, I have a lot of slides about this, and we'll go through them pretty quick. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the questions section and we'll answer them at the end. So 941s need to be corrected when you identify an error in a 941 return that was already filed. This includes data about wages, withholding, Social Security, Medicare, tax credits, or payments. If you over-reported your taxes, you can correct that within 3 years of the date from which the 941 was filed, or 2 years from the date you paid the taxes, whichever is later. 941 for a calendar year are considered filed on April 15th of the succeeding year if you filed them on time. And regardless of how you filed your original 941, corrections do still need to be done on paper. This is really kind of a pain. And if you follow IRS news closely like I do, you may know that the IRS is working on some technology options that will give us the ability to correct 941s electronically, but we're not quite there yet. So because you need to file your corrections on paper, you will need to mail your corrections. If you are in certain states, you're going to mail that correction to the IRS offices in Cincinnati, or in other states, you will mail your correction to the IRS offices in Ogden, Utah. So this is something that you should always consult. Again, I'm going to say this a bunch of times. Make sure that you're consulting with local counsel before you file your corrections to ensure that everything's being corrected the right way and that your correction is going to the right location. If you are a certain kind of organization, in particular, if you are a tribal nation, you will automatically file your correction in Utah, regardless of what state your business operates in. All right, so you, in order to do your corrections, you are going to do them on paper, but you can still fill them out on the computer if that's your preference, using a PDF editor, such as Adobe Acrobat. You can type or print, so you can also print it out and use a pen to fill out the information, or you can do it on your computer. You should use the Courier font, which has the best readability for the government scanners, as well as other tips include omitting the dollar signs, showing the full amount for cents, even if the cents number is 0. On 941s, we do not round to whole dollars. You do need to complete all of the pages, even if you're only correcting one field, and you need to have a signature on page 5. And then if you have multiple sheets, which you do because there's more than 5 pages, you should staple them together in the upper left corner, but make sure that all the pages are still readable. If you have multiple quarters that need to be corrected, which is often true, we make one error that needs to be corrected, and we have what's called a cascading correction. So one correction leads to multiple corrections. You do need to file a separate 941 correction for each quarter that needs to be corrected. You cannot just file it once. You do need to file for each quarter separately. Page 1, part 1, this is kind of the top section. The part we want to call out here is the return that you're correcting. Just like we already talked about, 1 quarter at a time per correction. So you should only select with 1 for each type of return and 1 quarter. If you have to correct multiple quarters, you need to submit multiple corrections, and then the calendar year. You also should try to be as accurate and honest as possible about the date you discovered the errors. as this helps with the compliance process with the IRS. This is one of the most important things to talk about, is talking about what you're correcting and how you're correcting it. So make sure if you underreported or overreported that you are checking the correct box. If you're correcting both underreported and overreported tax amounts, which is pretty common, there's a separate box to check for that. If you are filing within 90 days of the expiration of the period of limitation, so basically if you're filing a correction for the most recent quarter, you're going to check a different box because it's a slightly different process with the government to do a correction that close to the original filing. And then if you are only correcting an over-reported amount, you're going to select some different options that will help that get processed a little faster. So this is what we're talking about on page 1, part 2, is these are the different options that you're going to check depending on what you're claiming and what you're correcting in your reports. These options are really detailed, so make sure that you review them closely. Make sure that you consult with your local counsel to ensure that you're selecting the right option in order to get that correction processed without penalty. Line 4 adjustments and lines 4 and 5 are for adjustments and claims, and you're only going to use these if the employee taxes are impacted. If you're correcting something that isn't going to change the employee tax amounts, you do not need to fill out lines 4 and 5. 4A, 4B, and 4C, those are the different types of corrections and adjustments that you're making to if the over-reported amount includes the employee's share of over-collected taxes. 4B, if only the employee share of taxes on those employees who you were unable to find, or those who didn't give you a statement described on line 4A, or line 4C, if you over-reported the amount only for federal income tax or taxes and other taxes that are not withheld from your employees. Line 5 is for claims. So if you are certifying that you have repaid employees for over-collected taxes, or if you 5C, 5D, if you do not need to repay employees because the correction and claim is for taxes that were not withheld from the employee paycheck. We're not going to go into each one of these boxes in depth. We only have a short time on today's webinar, but we want to talk through kind of the basics of filling out this part of the form. If the line does not apply to your situation, do not fill it out. Do not put zeros. Do not fill it out at all. If you have made a previous correction, so if you have already if this is a second correction or a third correction to a 941 that has already been corrected, make sure you're using column 2 to enter the most recent amount from the most recent correction. And when you fill out line 6 over here in column 1, wages, tips, and other compensation, this should be the amount that appears on the totals for your W-2s. And in general, you should only correct federal income tax withholding errors if you discovered the errors in the same calendar year you paid the wages. If the calendar year has already ended, those withholding errors would be corrected when the employee files their own income tax return. And so the employee withholding would be corrected that way versus you filing a correction. We're going to breeze through this slide also. Adjustments, make sure you're using the most current form, and make sure that you are working with your counsel to make sure all these values are correct. There are a lot of different credit programs available, and different companies participate in them differently. So make sure that you're using the best information available with your accounting team and legal team to make sure that you're filling these values out correctly. Kind of the same thing when it comes to employee retention credit. We are coming to the end of the available time to claim employee retention credits. Employee retention credits are only available on corrections for 941s from 2020 through 2021. So if you are going to claim employee retention credit, it needs to be on a 941 for an applicable quarter when the credit was available. and we are getting to the end of the time period in order to claim that. The IRS has some really great resources available that we'd be happy to share if you need help on how to claim that employee retention credit. And Greenshades is happy to help you with getting all the information you need onto your 941 correction. When you calculate it, make sure that you are using the right calculation based on the qualifying period, because those employee retention credits vary from quarter to quarter. As I said, Greenshades is here to help. Tax credits, 941 corrections are complicated. This is something that we do in partnership with our clients and their legal teams to make sure that the information being corrected is correct, and to help you make sure that those corrections are processed without penalty. All right, we will go ahead and turn things over to Alicia to talk about those W-2s and 1099s and how to correct those.
All right, so let's start off with revising a W-2. When can you just revise a W-2? So we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. It's basically going to be dependent on whether or not you have filed your W-2 return with the IRS. And so if you have not done that yet, you find that once you've distributed the W-2s, an employee comes back to you and says something along the lines of one of these totals doesn't seem right to them, you do have an opportunity to revise that form before you send in your W-2 e-file or paper return, depending on how you're choosing to file this year. All right. And how do you create these revised W-2s? Well, Greenshades makes it easy. If you'll notice in the screenshot here, there is a checkbox where you can mark something as void. That would be for a paper copy, but we also give you the option in the Greenshades product to go through the process of doing these revised and corrected forms. We can walk you through that with a simple couple-step process. Once you go in and update your W-2, it will ask you if you want to file a correction at that time. That's usually a good indicator that you will need to send out new copies to your employees of these corrected returns, and also refile your W-2 return because you've already submitted the original one. If you've not done that yet, as I mentioned, you can still mark this as just revised and give a new copy to the employee before you send out that form. If you want to go to the next slide, this gives us a screenshot here of exactly what it would look like in the Greenshades product. So there's a little drop-down menu you'll see there in the corner that shows you the state of this form, whether it's an original form or a corrected form, and that would be the process that you go through in order to create those new forms. You can also download a new mail batch within the year-end forms product of these new forms, and also get those sent out through our print and mail service if you need to. Why would you need to file a correction? Well, there's a couple different options. If you found that the EIN you filed your original with is not correct, you're certainly going to want to take the steps to correct that. You're going to need to file not only a new original with the correct EIN, but you're also going to have to file a corrected W-2 to zero the wrong EIN instead of double reporting your employees' W-2 totals. Another thing that you might have forgotten is to include some items in box 12. And there's a couple other items that we listed out here that would qualify for a correction. One thing that, again, we strongly want to recommend here is when in doubt, hit up your legal counsel. They'll be able to research and find out what fields do require a correction versus just a new form given to your employees that they can file with their personal W-2 returns. All right, how to create a W-2C. The process is also very similar. You can go into the tax product and select the corrected return, fill in the edited fields, and get that submitted. For a paper return, however, there is going to be additional columns here, just like with the paper 941X to do the correction. You're going to fill in the previously reported totals as noted in the appropriate column, and then fill in the correct information in the correct column. You'll get that sent in if you're doing paper returns, and hopefully have this all squared away. All right, if you are doing paper returns and you need to send these in, we have the addresses here available for you to take note on. Give you a second here just in case you need that. Form W-2 and W-3 are, again, paper forms. You're going to want to include the original copies of these along with your reconciliation W-3 paper copy. and send those in to the address that we provided on the previous slide. Make sure that you have provided all the appropriate copies to your employees before sending this in. And then if you do need to do any type of correction, you'll notice here, kind of similar to the previous screenshot, there's columns where you would fill in the originally reported totals and the totals that need to be corrected. The same W-2s versus W-3s, you're going to have to fill in the corrected information for both and send those in. You can also sometimes download a Acrobat copy, PDF copy, that makes this a little bit easier to fill in from the IRS website. And we could probably include links to that in our recap email as well. All right, so filing the EFW2 correction, that stands for the electronic copy. So if you're using Greenshades to file your W-2s and you have 50 corrections to make, you will be, or you have 50 corrections to make, you will be required to send this in via e-file. Again, we make that very easy in the product. Once you fill in the corrected W-2 employee forms, the product will prompt you to do a correction e-file, and then you'll just walk through the same steps to do that you did in the original. All right, so now let's talk about correcting the 1099s. The process here is going to be very similar to W-2s. 1099s are for your vendors, of course, whereas W-2s are for your employees. So just like with the W-2 form, there is a box to check that this is corrected, should you need to send out a follow-up copy to any of your vendors. You can also file this electronically to the IRS, but if you choose to do paper form, that is certainly an option available if you are printing out your 1099s through your own ERP. There's, again, the voided versus corrected. Make sure that you're checking the right box before you mail those out. All right, and then 1095Cs, we've highlighted that here on the screenshot as well so that you can easily find that. But the same with the other forms. If you find that there's something you've submitted either to an employee or once you've e-filed, you need to do a correction, you can come back into our product and review the form, mark something as voided or corrected, and get a new copy out to your employees for this 1095C. Here on the form, we've kind of labeled, we've noted here on the left the different columns that are here. But if you have to go in and mark a correction, you'll know, or actually the first column is whether or not you offered the coverage. That's important to note because if your employee was not offered, then that's going to send a flag if the IRS considers this to have been a situation where they should have been offered. A lot of different rules go into whether someone should be offered, so do take legal counsel on that. The second column is whether what the employee's contribution to that optional healthcare would be, and that's how that helps the government determine, which would be in the third line, whether or not it was considered affordable. So do keep those totals in mind. Make sure that you're filling this out properly, and also make sure that you're filling in the appropriate months that would apply. If your employee had not been there the full year, then there would only be certain months here filled in. All right, some common errors that we find. Again, always double check your employees. Make sure that everybody is accounted for, that you have the correct totals. The minimum essential coverage is for 95% of full-time employees to be covered. So make sure that you are reviewing your totals before you send in your e-files. Make sure you've included everyone that should be covered. Double check your full-time employee count and your total employee count. That may be a good opportunity for you to find a discrepancy if somebody was maybe counted as full-time and shouldn't have been, or vice versa. And like I mentioned, line 14 will help you determine if coverage was offered, the right coverage was offered. 15 helps determine whether or not it was affordable. And the following line helps you meet the requirements for the shared responsibility of offering your employees affordable healthcare coverage. Usually these do coincide with your W-2s. They're going to the same employees. Filing your W-2s, getting those uploaded into year-end forms early will give you the opportunity to verify your Social Security numbers before you need to submit your 1095. And so that will give you kind of a leg up, make sure that this is ready to go before the filing deadline comes along. All right, and state and local amendments sometimes do need to be managed as well. You're welcome to call into support or email into support. We will try to provide you the best information that we can. We do always recommend, as we've said several times through this webinar, to reach out to your legal counsel. They're always going to be the best ones to advise you. We're certainly here to help where we can, provide you software support where necessary.
All right, so that just about wraps up our content for today. Just to recap a little bit, Greenshades has more than 20 years of experience in tax and compliance. I know we're all very busy right now filing those W-2s and 1099s. Something that we can facilitate in a single process that's really easy. We also make sure that you have the ability to empower your employees to access their own tax forms in a self-service portal. And we also support secure transfer of data and importing of that information to common tax preparation software like TurboTax and H&R Block. Greenshades is a payroll, HR, and tax cloud-based solution that supports your entire employee lifecycle from hire to retirement. And so our key takeaways for today were understanding the difference between when you need to file a correction, adjustment, or a revision, talking about the resources you have on how to make those corrections, and going through some of the common compliance errors and pitfalls of filing corrections. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you.